Hello, friends. My name is Monty Paulson. I lead the Pacifast team at RDH Building Science, and it is my privilege to welcome each of you to this Pacifast Happy Hour hosted by Pacifast Accelerator. This is an inclusive gathering. We welcome people from all Pacifast communities, as well as anyone else working to build creative buildings with zero emissions and much less embodied carbon. We particularly welcome newcomers, and we'll have in a few moments, we'll get a chance to introduce each other in some breakout rooms just for a minute. So please turn on your cameras. We'd love to see your face. Please turn on your microphones for just a minute. We'd love to hear your voice. And on this August day, let's host courtyards and really deep balconies.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers. Cheers. Totally, yes.
Really deep balconies. As those of you who know me know, I just rail against 2-foot deep balconies, which I think are just worthless thermal bridges, but give me a good 6 or 8 foot deep balcony and we'll throw a party. So now please do mute your mics for a little bit. Close those other apps you've got open. Your email will still be there. We have some great stuff on deck tonight. First, we have a professionally produced video by CNN about our own host, Michael Ingwe. Excuse me. I keep doing that, Michael. I'm so sorry.
I like it anyway. I think that's pretty cool.
And then we have a great presentation about the SOLIS project on Capitol Hill in Seattle. The presentation is by Swain of Weber Thompson. And what I urge you to watch for in this project is a great example of the best multifamily Pacifast advice we've seen from project after project. That early planning, a focus on form factor, window area, space for ventilation equipment, and mechanical simplicity will result in affordable and elegant multifamily Pacifast. And this example you're going to see is like perfect example of how those tools work. Now, please let me introduce my co-host, Prudence Ferreira.
Hey everyone, it's great to see you again. For those of you who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting in person or virtually yet, I'm Prudence Ferreira. I lead the Pacifast practice for Morrison Hirschfield. And Monty, I'm right there with you on those deep balconies. In fact, I've been here in Northern California for the past month, and I think it was 105 a couple of days ago.
Ouch.
And for those of you who don't know, I used to live in Alaska, and I have a fur daughter who's a 100-pound sled dog. So those deep balconies are like, she's got to have them. I'm super excited to announce that my official migration from West Coast to East Coast is imminent. I've got my plane tickets, so I'm showing up in Philly at the end of September. Woohoo! I'm super grateful to be with all of you tonight. And for those of you who are new, we're thrilled to welcome you. Please know the strength of this community comes from sharing of our diversity of knowledge and experience, and there are no dumb questions, only the ones you don't ask. On a personal note, I'd like to share that as we move into I think it's our 22nd show, right? 22nd week? Yeah.
That's right.
I've actually noticed myself, got, good weeks and bad weeks, but I've noticed myself struggling with sadness and longing, and that it comes around every once in a while. I miss people. I really miss people. I feel it. It's pretty intense. And though I'm so glad to see everyone's face through this little portal and hear your voices, I'm really sad that we can't hang out together. And I'm really longing for that time when we get to. One of the things that I realized is that sometimes I really resist feeling that stuff. And when I resist feeling it, it locks up my energy, it binds it up. And this last week I did this exercise of just really letting myself feel it, just going there, going into it. And I could not believe all of the energy that got freed up, which I could then apply to creative endeavors, doing good work in the world. So I just wanted to invite you all to know that we're here as a community, not just to geek out on Pacifast stuff, but when we go out into the breakout rooms, feel free to make friends, talk about what's really going on with you in your personal life. Let's just be here for each other. So cheers to loving ourselves, loving each other in our humanness, and finding joy in being together.
Funny thing. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'd like to share some announcements with you, and then we're going to get into the meat of the program. First, I'm super excited to announce that Corp has joined the Pacifast Accelerator as a founding sponsor. You're probably familiar with Stowe Corp as a provider of Pacifast facade systems, and they have a suite of products that address air tightness and continuous insulation. So welcome to Stowe, thank you. Also want to announce NAPHN has a new bi-weekly series called NAPHN Live, and it's going to be a webinar about fundamentals of online marketing for Passive House. The first one will be, this is next Tuesday on August 16th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, 8 p.m. Eastern. This session will be hosted and presented by Passive House Rocky Mountains. Yep. And you can see the URL there.
Hey, can I just get a quick feedback? So yep. I'm going to try to make this Tuesday, and it's every other Tuesday going forward. And what's really exciting about what NAPHN is doing here is they've had these regional meetings for years, but we can't go because there's things happening in different regions. And now, because the regional meetings are all going to be online and on Tuesdays and free, it creates this ability to kind of peek in on what's happening around the country and with different topics of Passive House. You might ask yourself, so what's different between the NAPHN Tuesday call and the Pacifast Accelerator Wednesday call? The bottom line is what NAPHN wants to do is make the Tuesday call more like a seminar. It's like an hour of real presentation. They're going to try to get AIA credit and ultimately PHI credit and maybe some other in for that 1 hour with real content, whereas we're more like a party. And so we're going to support them and try to attend more of those, but still come back here to just have a beer and say hello. Sorry for interrupting that.
Will Ken Levinson be the MC? Is Ken Levinson going to be the MC for that one?
I don't know.
Since he's now the director.
Yeah, that's true. That's important Pacifast news. Thank you for sharing that, Tom. Ken Levinson is now the executive director of NAPHN. We just learned a couple days ago, so congrats to Ken.
Congrats to Ken.
In the spirit of sharing about our Kindred Spirit events, we also have a number of online Passive House gatherings and building science gatherings that we like to share with everybody. So on Wednesdays, there's Passive House Canada's Building Conversations earlier in the day. On Thursdays, there's the Fine Home Building BS and Beer Show. And on Fridays, we have BS Fridays with Dave Cooper and Mark Wiley. And Mark, maybe later in the program, you can share about what's happening this Friday. There are some links there to get more information about those events. And the fourth announcement is that the International Passive House Conference early bird deadline has not expired. It's still ahead. It's August 24th. And so you can still register for this conference that will be held throughout a number of sessions that start September 20th and conclude on October 8th. So I'd like now to thank our sponsors that make Passive House Accelerators work possible. Our founding sponsors are Baxting Gui Architects, Mitsubishi Electric, RDH Building Science, Stowe Corp, and Zola Windows. Our stakeholder partner is NYSERDA, and our patron sponsors are Morrison Hirschfield and 475 High Performance Building Supply. And with that, I'll hand it off for the introduction.
Can you guys hear me? It says my internet connection is unstable.
We can hear you.
Okay, good. All right, cool. All right. Well, it's my pleasure tonight to introduce our guest, Aaron Swain. Aaron grew up in Wisconsin down the street from a few Frank Lloyd Wright Usonian houses, and that sparked his interest in architecture. And although in high school he was interested in architecture, he took the long way around and decided to study German literature first instead, first in Wisconsin and then in Freiburg, Germany, before attending graduate school in Eugene, Oregon. And then after that, he spent a few years working in finance, publication, and finally got to construction work, both single family and multifamily, all while taking a nomadic route from Wisconsin to Seattle, stopping over in Colorado and Utah for some epic winters on the slopes. Since then, Aaron has built his experience in master planning, urban design, mixed-use sustainable designs, construction documents, and now high-rise construction. Thanks so much for joining us, Aaron.
Thank you, Prudence. And I don't know if you remember, but you actually taught me in the Passive House CPHC lessons a few years back. So
I do remember.
we're doing it. Yeah. Awesome. So I'm going to share my screen here. Let's start this up. All right. Can everybody see my screen all right? All right. So let me just start by saying thank you to both Pacifast Accelerator and to all of you for joining me today. I really love the opportunity to talk about one of my favorite projects that I've been able to work on, and that's Solas Apartments. As mentioned, it is in Capitol Hill in Seattle. And one last shout out to our developer partner on the project, Solterra. They had the will to see the vision of the project through to completion, and it's great. I hope you'll agree. So with that, I'm gonna move these controls a bit. Okay, so diving into a quick tour of the project. It is 45 units spread over 5 levels, with 1 level of ground floor retail and a little bit of potential office space at that ground floor as well. There is also a below grade parking level for 13 parking stalls. And then what you can just make out at the top is the major amenity of the rooftop terrace space up at the top. Our project is currently in the process of the PHIUS Plus 2015 certification, going through the administrative paperwork as I understand it. So we had the fortune of embracing Passive House very early on in this project, starting really in concept design and schematic design. So we were really able to take the 3 primary needs, that being the air tightness and air barrier component, the thermally tuned building envelope, and the balanced mechanical system, and really integrate them into a comprehensive design moving forward. And for this project, that translated into these 4 basic strategies. The first being simple massing. So looking at the image on the left, you can see it's more or less a box. This kind of leads into the second strategy, which was reducing the conditioned area. So we actually pulled the stair and the elevator shaft out of the envelope, which not only reduced the conditioned area, but it also reduced some of those tricky penetrations that you have to deal with for air sealing. Item number 3 was optimizing the envelope, and we went through a number of iterations of wall assemblies, really focused hard on how do we limit the number of penetrations, knowing that air sealing is such a challenge and really the top priority, in my opinion, of success in Passive House. And then looking at glazing area. So for a market rate project, we're usually seeing glazing areas in the 35 to 45% range, but we knew that that would really challenge the Passive House performance criteria. So we looked really hard at how we would achieve that, and we'll see some of that in the next slide. And then the last item was really taking a hard look at anything we do. Our developer was really cost conscious, as most developers are. So everything that we put on the building had to be multifunctional and really perform in more ways than just one. So this is the building today. Quick little note, there's still work going on the sidewalk, so we are going to get prettier street frontage than that. But the building itself is what it's going to be, and I think it's gorgeous personally. But what we see from this view is the exterior stair that I mentioned previously as a major design component as well. And then on the south side of the building, which is to the right, we see the bolt-on balconies, which not only add amenity space for the tenants, but it also provides shading for the unit below. Not part of the Passive House envelope because that was really just the residential floors, but we did also bring this exterior component down at grade level to really highlight the idea of outside amenity spaces, which was a theme of the project as well. So I mentioned glazing area before. This building achieves 27%, which is way less than the 35 to 40 we typically get. But I think it's sufficient. And a little later on, I have a slide of interior, and you can judge for yourself what you think the light quality and the effect of the windows is. So hopping around 180 degrees. So this is the view from the interior corner, looking at the east elevation on the left and then the north elevation on the right. What we see immediately on the east is all of our exterior utility components. So we have our storm drains running down the exterior of the building so that we could avoid internal drain penetrations. And then we also have our garage exhaust shaft and our transformer room shaft up to the north end. And then moving around to the north side, we have a lovely, zero window, blank wall facade. And it produced a great opportunity for artwork, which in the neighborhood is very popular. And there's a lot of great murals around the Capitol Hill neighborhood. So contributing back to the neighborhood in that aspect as well. The name of the piece is Amaterasu, and it's by Finn Dock, which our client Solterra had worked with before and have put murals by them on other buildings as well. So then jumping to what we call the fifth elevation, or the rooftop, you can get a sense of the landscape and really the power of the amenity up here. Fantastic views of the city. That central view is looking to the west. So you kind of see downtown there with then the Olympics back in the background. Again, the termination of the stair coming up to kind of complete that transition in a full exterior promenade. And then kind of back to the north, we had a lot of landscaping to add character, but then also to kind of shield our mechanical screening, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then the obvious thing is all this is covering our extra thick insulation layer, tapered outboard insulation to slope to the east side where we saw the downspouts in the previous slide. So to the interiors, on the right, there's the view from the inside with the windows, as well as the technical aspect of the windows. We did get a Eurotech triple glazed. On the left, we have the kitchens with the energy efficient appliances. Fairly typical for market rate apartments to have kind of that compact kitchen and small appliances. We also like the real clean look that we felt kind of contributes. One thing that often gets overlooked in a passive house is the amazing air quality that you get from the filtered air and the quiet that you get from your triple glazed windows. So we really saw it all kind of working together to create this really clean and modern, sleek environment. So that's the brief tour. Power of hindsight. What have we learned along the way? So first big takeaway was really the mechanical system. And anybody that's worked on a market rate multifamily project, you know that there is an intense VE exercise at some point where we're always over budget. We always have to suck more money out, but somehow we end up being able to build the project in the end, which is great. So we went through it and we had really dialed in our envelope. So we couldn't do much at the exterior of the building, which can be a big cost. So it really boiled down to the mechanical equipment. And we initially had a single ERV to serve the whole building. Not sure why, but we ended up with 5 individual ERV units. Fortunately, we did have large enough closets on each floor, but we have 1 ERV per floor and had to locate that in the closet. So the big takeaway was plan for the amount of space, as Monty alluded to early on, is really make sure that you have space for the amount of equipment that you're going to end up with. And the other big takeaway that has come up before is get your mechanical guys on board as soon as possible, really get them to embrace what it is, what the goals of the project are, and be serious about it. A lot of times they come in and they're not getting paid to do that early pre-con work. So they're just doing little napkin sketch things and then they walk away, come back 6 months later. And really, from a team standpoint, we really need to get them engaged and paid just like the rest of us that are working on this project to come up with the best possible solutions. So real quick on this slide, we have our ERV in the closet on the left, kind of a schematic diagram of the fresh air system and the ERV working. We originally had a reverse cycle chiller to manage hot water, but that did get VE down to 2 gas boilers. So one of our other takeaways was kind of looking at long-term carbon emissions. These 2 gas-fired boilers are contributing something between 30 and 40% of our carbon emissions for operation energy. And we can't have that in this day of climate change. We really need to do better. The good news is that City of Seattle is really limiting or potentially eliminating gas connections in all new construction. So this will not be an option moving forward. And hopefully we can work with our developers to make sure that that is reality and not just an idea the city has. The last slide at the bottom, just a couple of our heat pump units that ended up down in the garage because that's where we had space for it. Not terrible to have it down there, but we literally ended up with equipment everywhere that it could possibly fit because we ended up with a lot more equipment than we originally had in mind. So then jumping to the roof, here's kind of our farm of heat pumps. We have, I believe, 48 heat pumps on the project, and it took up a lot of space on the roof. And as we saw in the rooftop amenity, that's taking away space from that amenity. So the developer wasn't necessarily happy with this option, but the roof is the best place to put a lot of this equipment. So really dialing in, how can we reduce the amount of equipment, reduce the amount of space that it takes up, and really fine tune that really early on. One place where we saw great success, however, though, was the corridors. We planned really early on, knowing that we were going to have all the ductwork for the supply and return air to the ERVs. So we planned for some higher ceilings in our corridors. The picture on the left shows the original ceiling with the pre-rock in there for the box out. And then the middle is the ductwork being installed with some electrical in place as well as the fire sprinklers. And then on the right, on the right is the final result. And we ended up with a finished ceiling, I think just shy of 8 feet. So a little bit more generous than it could have been if we had not planned for it. So the one that everybody knows and that we hear and repeat like a broken record is really the air barrier detailing. Big shout out to BEE, our building envelope consultant team. They put together a great set of details and worked really closely with the contractor as well as ourselves to make sure that we dialed in exactly what we were doing. We originally had a sheet good product for our exterior WRB and air barrier. And the contractor led the charge in pushing for the fluid applied, which we ended up with. So it is a Prosoco product. And it was their push saying, hey, we know how important the air barrier is. We want to make sure that we get it right. And we know that this product really helps us get it right and account for all the penetrations that come on down the road later. So that decision, which they drove, it was Cascade Built as our developer, lots of experience in doing single family and townhome development, but this was I guess it was their second multifamily project. But they drove the ship on that and convinced the developer that that was the right way to go. And in the end, it worked out great. I believe our air barrier test, we achieved a 0.02 was the final test. Sorry about that, oops. And then also just the window detailing is a whole lot easier with that fluid applied system. So there were a lot of benefits towards going with that fluid applied system. Continuing on with air barrier detailing, the parapet detail is always a tricky spot. Oh, my slide moved, so this was supposed to be down here. But basically, we opted and worked with the contractor and our building envelope consultant and came up with the solution where the air barrier runs beneath the parapet, which challenged their sequencing a little bit. But what you can see is that they came in and they did a little pre-rock of the sheathing, and then they were able to wrap the waterproofing using a self-adhesive membrane to connect and keep that continuity of the air barrier. Here it is underneath with the sill plate on top. And again, just more pictures of the pre-rock here and then the actual parapet built up there itself. So last item was really the team. Couldn't have achieved it without, number one, our great team at Weber Thompson. We had a lot of people that both put in a lot of hours to make sure we got it right and learned a ton in the process. So we are ready to do our next Passive House multifamily project. And we also had a great consultant team. I mentioned BEE. Cascade Built, our contractor, performed very well. Arc Ecology did the energy modeling with Dan Luddy as the CPHC. And the whole team really worked well to achieve the final result. So thank you for listening. And I think we have time for some questions.
Absolutely. What a great presentation. I just love the way that building came together. Really well done. I'm sure we have a whole bunch of questions. There's been some great ones in the chat. Sean, do you have a few queued up to start with?
Yeah, we'll get, Damien started here, but again, just a big thank you to Kirsten, who was answering a lot of those questions. And we'll probably repeat a few of them just because I think there's some good discussions that can come out of them. But again, thanks to Kirsten for helping out with that. Damien, you had one of the original questions before we jump into Susan.
Yeah, very excited by the shafts, vertical shafts kept out of the envelope. Definitely like to see that more and used more for the services within the building. But wanted to ask about the air blocking for the elevator on each floor.
Yeah, so we had to go in for a code alternate. That was a tricky code situation because we had the elevator right next to the stair, and our plan reviewer did want to have those isolated. So we ended up, I think I have a plan that I can share. Yeah, this doesn't have it. We actually ended up with a door right here that's on a hold open. And that was to appease the planner. And it worked pretty well. I think everybody was pretty happy with the result. It's not as open as we had hoped. One of the other goals of the project, we were trying to build, to Monty's point about large balconies, we were hoping that that stair could serve as a social balcony as well and provide another amenity space. But it is an exit stair, so the planner was not very excited about the idea of people hanging out and lingering on that stair. So we had to shrink it down a little bit. But the good news was that at the end of the day, we were able to get it done. And it did, I mean, the amount of area that we have for circulation space in this building is just this corridor for the most part, and then the other exit stair to the north. So it's pretty darn efficient from service to the usable ratio.
Yep.
Good one. Thanks, Damien. Susan, you had a couple of questions. Go ahead with whichever one you remember.
Yeah, thanks. They're not so much questions as sort of like a stream of consciousness that goes into the chat. And I think the first one I just remarked, well, there were balconies, but then there was a lot of answers going on in there. So I don't know if you want to talk about the balconies or how that was attached. Or the other question before you jump in, Aaron, thank you, was about the fan. Whenever we see kitchen fans, we always go off onto how we're managing that. But then that was answered, recirculated. And then my last question, sorry, three's the charm. I'm always seeing these fluid applied as solutions, these fluid applied systems, and I'm just curious, what do we know what the life expectancy is of these products? Just if you could maybe start by answering that one, because that's one wasn't answered in the chat. Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, that's a great question. Life expectancy on a, it's not a brand new product, but it is relatively new to the market. The benefit that we really see though is that it's protected, right? So all of our new systems, particularly on multifamily, we build with a rain screen assembly. So anything that's back behind is almost a secondary layer from the direct driving rain. The fluid applied has worked very well. It used to be used on CMU behind brick, and I think that's been going for quite a while, at least in the 1- and 2-story type buildings. And now Persoco has been able to make some red list free waterproofing, which is great because we know a lot of chemicals can go into our waterproofing components. So we have confidence in it as the architect that recommends the system. Our developer has confidence that it's going to be durable for the long run. I don't know if any of the hosts, I know Prudence, you're pretty knowledgeable on some of the waterproofing issues. I guess you're more energy, but if anybody else has some info on it, I'm always open to that sharing. But we have confidence that the product will perform better, mostly because the sheet goods, they get beat up and damaged So it's really easy to poke a hole in a sheet good and less easy to do in a fluid applied without intentionally trying to put a hole in it. So that's where our confidence comes from.
We can definitely talk more about fluid applied stuff as we move into the after hour, but let's keep moving through the questions now and we can dork out on that stuff later.
Yeah, I do want to respond to your other question about the balconies. It was a big decision because obviously it's a thermal bridge connection, but we do bolt-on balconies on most of our multifamily projects. What we did for this one though is limit them just to the south elevation. You know, on a typical developer kind of market rate project, they might have put balconies over the whole east and west facades just to get that balcony area for the tenants. But we knew that we wanted to limit the thermal bridging there. So we kept it just on the south where it was also providing that added benefit of shading.
Great. Thank you very much.
Great stuff, great questions. And yeah, when we get to talking about the fluid applied, we'll talk about why not a peel and stick. Because I know fluid applied is definitely used in Seattle a lot, especially with the Bullet Center. So interesting that. So the next one is Lindsay Klein.
Yes, I am. Sorry.
Okay.
I actually was really intrigued with the lobby on the street level that's outside the envelope. And I was wondering if you could explain, once you get into that, what's the transition like from there to the interior of the envelope?
Yeah, great question. And I'm sorry I didn't have more time to spend on that, but so there is a screen here. This area represents the full exterior portion. And then again, we do have that, actually it's right here. We have that barrier between the stair and the elevator with then kind of a, I don't believe it's thermal, but there is another connection back here. Yeah, this is all secondary condition space, so not directly conditioned. So you walk in through security and you come into this gracious space, which was kind of, let me, bear with me for a second here. So this is actually the interior corner. So there's kind of a little bench here. I apologize, I don't have a full slew of pictures, but if you go to our website, there are more pictures than I have here. So there's definitely more information. But that view is kind of looking at this interior corner right here. So it's very small, but the idea is that you come in and then you can extend up to the exterior stair to get to your lobby. We do have a mailroom and bike storage and some other unit storage in this back of house area back here, but there's not like game rooms or a video game room or a lot of the typical interior amenities that we see in multifamily projects in Seattle these days.
So you either take the elevator up to your floor or you walk up the stair to a new lobby?
Nope. This is the only lobby down at grade level, and then once you go up the stair, you end up freezing up here. You end up on our lovely exterior stair that you can see from the outside.
Thank you.
Great. And next we had in the queue was Caleb.
Which one? I mean, I was wondering whether you would consider doing PV panels up on the roof, and Kristen said something about you doing them as carports. So I was sort of curious as to what actually happened because I didn't actually notice them in your presentation.
Yeah, so as of today, they do not have PV panels on the roof. I believe that was something that got VE'd out in the short term for their bank loan with the idea that they can add it later. So we do have space where it's engineered to have the post mounts to be able to attach them, and then it could go above the mechanical equipment at the roof. So kind of that north section of the roof.
And then totally I just had because a number of people, like your movement away from the centralized, there was a question of ERV, there was a question about that, and then the same question would apply to why not use a more centralized VRF system, because you can usually submeter those. So those
Yep.
are two linked questions as to.
Great questions. So I'll start with the ERV. The original design, we were hoping to get the Ventacity unit installed. And again, this is where bringing your mechanical engineer in early and on board would have been very helpful. When they did get brought in, they were not comfortable with the product because it hadn't been installed in anything, so they couldn't see how well it performed. They're on the hook for warrantying the work that they do for at least a year. So they didn't have a comfort level with that product. So that drove us towards the five ERV system that we ended up with. So that was one. I think, technology has advanced quite a bit since then. They've gotten more familiar. So hopefully that won't be a hang up as much the next time around. Regarding the VRF to the heat pump, we did originally start with a VRF system. But then as our client changed, so our project went on hold and we got a new ownership team involved, and time passed. We saw a couple really hot summers in Seattle and smoke-filled summers in Seattle. And so the ownership team decided to go with the mini split heat pumps. They went with the mini split because it was cheaper to do 48 mini split units than to do any kind of centralized system, which is another, head scratcher. But perhaps for another conversation for the after happy hour discussion. So that's kind of how we ended up where we did, and definitely room to improve. I think there's a lot of new technologies that I'm curious about to see if it would fit in a multifamily realm, like the little Sonos single units. If we were comfortable doing that many more penetrations on the exterior of our building, would that be a good solution? Maybe the next project will give us an opportunity to explore some of that newer technology as well.
Thank you.
Great stuff, Caleb. And I think after we've seen Tim's project in Philadelphia, we're like, well, Tim did it. We can wrap all of our buildings in solar panels because Tim did it. So thanks, Tim, for always your inspiration. And I think we all would love to have those solar canopies now. In the area we up next was Julie. Julie, okay, we'll go to Tom next. I think I had Tom in the queue.
Howdy.
Sorry?
Yeah, the broken record for resilient climate adapted design. I saw some shading, but did you do any analysis of other passive measures to reduce energy and overheating risks for current and future climates? I know this was earlier maybe than BC kind of jumped on that bandwagon, but.
Yeah, great question. Because we were market rate urban infill, it's really about maximizing your envelope. So we were pushing as far as we could. I don't know if you could tell, but there was a power line that we had setback requirements from that further took developable area out of the project site. And it really boiled down to, okay, we have a corner. We can put balconies on the south side. We could have done some on the west side, but we knew that wasn't really going to benefit because balconies don't really help with western sun. But other than that, it was, we are cost sensitive. We would rather spend the extra money on triple pane glass than an exterior shade. At one point we had exterior mechanical shades, but those came back as 3 times the cost of the original company because the original company went out of business. So we looked at a bunch of different technologies. But at the end of the day, I think the mechanics of an exterior shade are a risk that a lot of owners don't want to take on. And our office actually that we have in Seattle, we have exterior shades and we've had more problems with them breaking down. Some of it has to do with the interface of the software to control it. But I think, we as designers were probably a little bit more reserved in the full-on mechanical shading approach. But dealing with that western sun, we did end up with triple pane glass that we had to then put the bill for. The ownership team had to pay down for that. So originally we did have just double pane with exterior shades, which is an interesting kind of side story as well.
Thanks.
All right, we'll dive into the side stories in the after hour. And just to clarify too, the blower door score, was it 0.2 or 0.02?
0.02.
That's
and I don't know if that was the official test or if that was the preliminary test that they did.
Well, again, exceedingly low, but could be record setting if it's 0.02. So good stuff. Sorry, Tom, which Tom was it? Sorry, we went from Tom Phillips to Tom Battlestall.
The other Tom?
Yep. Well, there's a few Toms here.
Yeah, I wondered if you would elaborate on why the chiller, the heat pump for domestic hot water was engineered out. It's a critical issue because of our codes advancing here in Washington, and developers don't want to do it, but they're going to have to.
Yeah. No, great question. I think it was two things. Again, it was, developer comfort with the technology, and also our mechanical engineers' comfort with the technology and the ability to just throw some gas-powered boilers in there for a lot less cost.
So yeah, so it was the price.
Ultimately, it was the price. Yeah.
Right.
Not going to be an option though, right? So we'll get there.
It's going to be, required almost.
Up next, we have Hank. I know your feed was coming in a little bit earlier. Okay, Hank, try us again. Scott, I'm going to hold on. You got about 5 questions, and they're good ones. Maybe we'll hold on yours to the after hour, just because we can dive into all those deep Passive House ones. Who do we have next? Carol. Carol's been answered. I think, Carol, just confirm, did Kirsten answer all your questions? Carol, are you there?
Yes, thank you. Kirsten did answer my questions. Thank you.
All right. Well, again, she's on fire with all this stuff, so appreciate her assistance. I think, sorry guys, I think everything's been answered unless, someone just privately messaged me. Here's Aaron, here's the always fun one. Cost per square foot. Are you able to talk about that lovely discussion, or Passive House premium and all that fun stuff?
I did as much research as I could. So I was prompted on this, and our client holds the numbers pretty tight to his chest. So their number that they gave us was 5% over premium, which doesn't tell you a whole lot unless you know what the premium is. So doing our due diligence with projects we've worked on, and this is all over the city, so Capitol Hill tends to be a little bit more expensive. But average cost per square foot we're seeing is $210 per square foot. I would say also take into account that is a typical building that might have larger or longer corridor space, amenity rooms in that interior square footage cost as well. And our building is really stripped down and condensed. So a lot of the cost is the appliances, the kitchens, finishes are relatively cheap in that square foot cost. So I would venture a guess that we're tending closer to $250 a square foot, but don't hold my feet to the fire on that number, please.
Gotcha. Thanks, Aaron. Again, always. Adam Martin, you had a question. Why don't you come on and I'll just double check to make sure I got everyone on tonight. Adam,
thank you, Sean. Aaron. Yep, I'm here. Aaron, great presentation. Thank you so much. Question about the mechanicals. You expressed sort of your disappointment that you had to tuck them here and there. And I don't know, to me, it sounds like maybe that was a great way to utilize space. What was your ideal situation? And and I guess simply, what's wrong with what you ended up with? Is it like just obstructive and it's not as pretty as you'd like it to be? What do you think?
No, great question, and I appreciate that. I don't think what we ended up with is bad. I just think that if we had the chance to do it over again and we had brought our mechanical team in sooner, we could have ended up with everybody on the same page, rather than where we ended up was we had one design. So our initial design was more of a central type design, mostly focused on limiting penetrations and just having everything one spot that serves the whole building. So it was all going to be on the roof, but it was hopefully not going to take up as much space as it ended up taking up. I think we ended up pretty good. You know, we have a lot of equipment on the roof, but we also have great space for amenity up there. The thing that I would shy or warn people about is if you don't leave yourself or intend some of that space for the mechanical equipment and potential growth of the amount of space that the mechanical equipment can take, then all of a sudden you're shrinking down your amenity that's up there, or you're having to take it out of a unit space. So looking at our ERV closet, fortunately we had a decent amount of room tucked behind there, and we didn't, if we had to go bigger, we would have been encroaching into a unit, and our average unit size is 576. So we do have some pretty small units on the small side, I would say. Yeah. So it's really, it takes up a lot of space. And you know, as designers, we draw a room in a corner somewhere, and somehow engineers manage to cram it in most buildings. And this one, we ended up with, oh, let's put some heat pumps down in the garage because they function very well down there, which was great. But we couldn't put all the heat pumps down there. So that would, you know, that was not an option. So we did end up kind of with equipment wherever we could get it to work. But I think at the end of the day, it worked out pretty well.
And on that point, Aaron, I'm just going to steal Caleb's question because he just wanted to know, do you find that there's some performances differencing between the ones in the parkade and the ones on the roof?
My understanding is that the ones in the parkade are serving the lower levels. So it's all about length of run for the refrigerant and yeah, I guess just the refrigerant to get to the units on the lower floors, and then up above, it's the units on the top floors. So I think the mechanical engineer likes that better because then they're not trying to feed too far with the extent of that refrigerant run. But as far as performance, it's pretty new. The building is, I think they're still leasing up, and we don't have tenants in the retail space because of COVID. So I don't think we really know how well things are performing overall.
Excellent. Yet. Well, again, thanks for the questions. Again, we've got a lot more to dump into the after hour. Zach, I'll come to you to give us the announcements for next week.
Yeah, fantastic. So next week we have Ian Robertson presenting the Blindham Passive House. I probably butchered the pronunciation of that, so a Vancouver native probably can help me out with that. But this is a passive house that combines passive house design and construction with mass timber. So pretty cool project, and we hope to see you next week.
Passed off to Monty and Prudence.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Aaron. Really appreciate that project. Really appreciate kind of just the elegant simplicity of everything you presented. So thanks for coming. Hey, just want to mention too that we are still urging / begging folks to bring us 2-minute videos from simple projects. And so if you have something you could do a walkthrough and take a few shots on, please give it a shot. We've been begging this for weeks now, and it occurs to us that maybe it might make sense for us to do a little webinar at some point about how to take the stuff you took on your iPhone and turn it into a quick video. And if you'd be interested in participating in a short session like that somewhere down the line, send Zach or myself or Prudence an email, or Sean an email, and just let us know. But we'd like to help more of us produce short videos that can be used on social media. And that's why we keep kind of urging the quick videos here at the beginning of the program. So if you have interest, and if technology is your barrier, let us know and we'll try to help out with that. Prudence?
Thank you so much, Adam, for being here. Yeah, I love seeing students that I've taught go out into the world and doing great things. You make me proud, makes my heart burst. So thank you for that. And thanks, Kirsten, for answering so many questions in the chat. It's fantastic to see the teamwork happening on the happy hour. And with that, yeah, let's roll into the after hour and see what more fun we can have.
All right, thank you, Prudence, Monty. Now, typically I delay the kickoff by cheersing, so I'm going to remember this time. So cheers, everyone, to another great session.